Coming up, how much longer will this pandemic linger? And now that the Pfizer vaccine has full government approval, are more people getting vaccinated? We'll talk to an expert about COVID-19. Plus, curating an exhibit on Seminole people for Disney's Epcot Center. We'll hear more about this unique partnership. I'm Patty Thalahongva. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from Indian Country Today.
Arizona PBS is proud to support Indian Country Today. For 6 decades, we've provided television programs and now digital content. But we go beyond that, sending outreach teams across Arizona, offering workshops in language and literacy, family engagement and community outreach, and supporting tribal communities with early learning and school readiness resources. Join us at azpbs.org.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalahongva. The Alaska Federation of Natives is postponing its annual convention due to the rising cases of COVID-19. AFN was set to take place in October, but will now be held in December. The board of directors changed the date to protect the health of Alaska Natives and others who typically attend. AFN President Julie Kitka said in a statement, "The high-risk factors of holding a 5,000-person indoor meeting with delegates coming in from across Alaska make an in-person October gathering out of the question." AFN hopes by December they will be able to hold an in-person convention in Anchorage with a virtual option. However, the final decision will be made by the board in mid-October based on new data and guidance from national, state, and tribal health leaders. In California, tribal leaders are encouraging the public to comment on a proposed mining project. It's located on the traditional homeland of the Paiute Shoshone and the Timbasha Shoshone, which is about a mile from California's Death Valley. K2 Gold's proposal will impact at least 12 acres of conglomerate mesa. The company is proposing to drill 1,000 feet underground at 120 sites to collect samples for gold analysis. Nearly 3 miles of new roads will also be constructed. The tribes say the mining and drilling in the region would permanently destroy cultural resources and traditional cultural use sites as they threaten water supplies, wildlife and plants, and recreation. The general public will be able to submit comments on this draft later this year. Then the Bureau of Land Management will review public comments and issue a draft environmental assessment. The last piece of steel is in place for a new casino resort being built by the Wilton Rancheria in Northern California. The tribe held an event on Monday to celebrate. Now that the steel is done, the building's exterior and interior wall construction will start. The Sky River Casino is the tribe's first casino. Construction broke ground for the project in March.
We want to thank you all of you, who have made such an amazing progress towards realizing our goal of opening Sky River Casino in the second half of next year. At the pace at which we are going, we may be able to open ahead of schedule. Thank you.
Leaders from the project team signed an iron beam, planted flags, and a fir tree, which will be planted on the site when it's completed. It's hard to explain how exciting the sport of Indian relay is. It's a combination of teamwork, horsemanship, and, as Shirley Snavy reports, swagger.
If you haven't heard about relay, you should look it up, and if you're ever in Minnesota, you should come to Canterbury Park. Indian Horse Relay hosted by the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community.
16 teams competed from the Dakotas, Oregon, Montana, Wyoming, and Alberta, Canada.
You know, it takes a lot of practice and confidence in your team that you can work together, and being acquainted with these horses, knowing horses. Like we've been with horses since we were little boys, eh? Like these are really high-strung animals, these thoroughbreds.
Women also compete.
We have a women's relay now where we have 2 horses and we do 1 exchange. And we also have the maidens race, which we just do mounted, 1 lap around the track.
Cody Big Tobacco rides for Old Sun Team. It's part of his heritage.
To be a role model for the kids back at home, show them they can go places with their horses and anything they put their mind to.
Racy Big Snake is Old Sun's mugger. Their job is to make sure the rider makes it onto the horses, which are bred to race.
They're strictly for to race. He's trying to answer my question for me. He's like, no. No, yeah, we strictly just race them. Sometimes if there's no horses in, my dad might use them to get cows in if it's not too strenuous.
The Shakopee Mdewakanton tribe sponsors the relay, which is a boost for the economy and tribal relations.
Bringing in some of the teams from out west and showcasing them in a really big facility like this, I think that's a big part of trying to bring Indian Relay to the next level.
Piconee Express won the first heat. In Shakopee, Minnesota, Shirley Snavy, Indian Country Today.
Piconee Express won the first heat, but Brew Crew from the Oglala Lakota Nation is in the lead for the finals tonight. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Tholohungva. When we come back, we'll talk with Dean Seneca about the latest on COVID-19 vaccines and booster shots and find out how much longer this pandemic will linger.
And later, we'll hear about a partnership between a tribe and Disney's Epcot Center and how it's educating more people about the Seminole Nation. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has a full website to give the public information on the vaccines for COVID-19 and the Delta variant. If you haven't gone to the website to read all this information, chances are you're not alone. We've asked Dean Seneca to join us today and give us an update on the vaccines, the variant, and the prognosis for the pandemic. He's the Chief Executive Officer for Seneca Scientific Solutions Plus. Welcome, Dean.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we have the news that the Pfizer vaccine now has full authority. What really does that mean?
That means that the public can be very confident that the vaccine meets the highest standards for safety, effectiveness, efficiency, and manufacturing quality.
Do you think some of the other versions will actually get this next step soon too?
I believe so, yes. I believe all of the vaccines, Moderna and J&J, are in that process and following those steps to get to that point of full authorization by the FDA.
There's an interesting global debate going on about whether the United States should get a third vaccine versus making sure that the rest of the world gets vaccines first. How should we think about that?
To be honest with you, I mean, if you have an opportunity to get a booster, you should go ahead and do it because that only continues to protect your immunity. It protects your family, it protects your community, the whole population. So if you have a pre-existing condition or have a low immune response and you have the ability to get a third vaccination, I mean, I would go ahead and do so. I would recommend that. Now, versus immunizing the whole world, I think that that's another monumental task that we're going to have to be, the United States is going to have to be at the forefront for. But we can't help others if we're not healthy ourselves. And that's the situation right now. The pandemic is rising. Cases are rising significantly. We're seeing levels as high as it was at the end of the winter wave. And this is very concerning because here's the big issue with this. Approximately half or 55% to 60% of the US population is vaccinated, and we're still seeing this rise in cases. And this is very, very, very concerning. If we didn't have these folks vaccinated, the situation could be much worse. And, again, the whole thing is to stop the spread of the virus. Stopping the spread will also stop the virus's ability to mutate into another variant. And that's why vaccinations, right now at this point in time, vaccinations are critical for us making an impact in the pandemic.
This whole idea about mutation is so fascinating because basically a vaccine looks for ways to succeed. and that includes finding new mutants. How dangerous is it if we don't increase the velocity of vaccinations?
Well, again, we're going to be in a situation where, I've said this before, this is a recipe for disaster in Indian country. One is we have overcrowded homes, right? We have a shortage of housing. That means we have multi-generational peoples living in a single home, right? We have huge pre-existing health conditions, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, which is also another main issue when it comes to this virus. And then we have, pretty much about 45% of the US population that is not vaccinated, right? And now we're having schools are opening up. We're going to send our children to school where those that are 12 and younger, don't have authorization for vaccinations. I mean, this is really, given this formula, this is a recipe for disaster, especially, sending our children in that kind of environment where we don't know if the teachers are vaccinated or not, and or if the school has mandated masks or not. And then they're going to come home and easily could infect the whole family with this new variant. The vaccination is very effective. 88.1% of the people who are vaccinated, are protected against this Delta variant. There's only just under 12% of the folks that are vaccinated, that could possibly, acquire or get this COVID-19 Delta variant. That's a very, very low percentage. But still, of those people who get the Delta, if you're vaccinated, you have protections. And given the viral loads of people who are vaccinated, you're less likely to spread the virus. So, vaccinations is the route to go. I mean, if we're really going to make an impact in this pandemic for Indian country.
In addition to the vaccination, even those of us who do have vaccinations, should we be more cautious? I'm thinking this week the Alaska Federation of Natives postponed its convention until December. Is that the kind of prudent steps that we should all be taking?
Well, yes. This variant is running rapid, and areas that it's impacting are Alaska, California area, Oklahoma area, and now last week, the Nashville area. We're seeing extremely high cases in those areas. Our daily case rate went up to 876, which again, this is almost, pre-pandemic or at the end of the last wave in the winter. And recently we had just 6,000 new cases of this Delta variant in Indian country, which is a huge percentage. So we're kind of on our way back up to what we were when we were in the middle of the winter, seeing cases. This is very concerning. So yes, we do have to, reduce large gatherings. We have to wear masks, and we have to safe social distance, and we have to continue to clean our environments. I mean, this pandemic is by far from over. And we have, as a country, have really let up on a lot of those precautions. Politics, unfortunately, has gotten involved with this, where politics shouldn't get involved in the health and safety of our people and our children.
You are looking ahead. What should we be concerned about the next variant?
Well, we really should be concerned that the next variant doesn't turn more deadly, right? We know that this variant right here is much more infectious than chickenpox and measles, which are extremely infectious. Meaning that, literally, even with the safest precautions, sending your children to school, or, wearing a mask in the community, and even being vaccinated, even with the most safest precautions, safe social distancing, cleaning your environment, the likelihood of getting this Delta variant is very, very high. It's pretty much almost probable. You will get this Delta variant if you're not careful, and if, you're sending your kids to school in an environment where the teachers aren't vaccinated, and there are no mask mandates. I mean, it is very, very likely that you will get this Delta variant. But for the future, that's what we really have to watch out for, that this virus mutates and actually becomes more deadly. The other big thing that you have to watch out for is is what is called long COVID or long-term COVID, where they're seeing health effects for people who have actually had COVID for like 8 months, 9 months, a year, and even more. We're seeing renal failure, we're seeing kidney disease, we're seeing impacts in the brain where there's alterations in the brain that are linked to Alzheimer's. This long COVID has significant impacts on people, and we're yet to know and uncover what all those impacts are. We're seeing differences in your immunity and your ability to produce an immune response has been significantly compromised if you're in a situation where you have long COVID.
With this new increased infection rate, how is the Indian health system adapting?
I think that we're doing pretty well, but I do think there's a significant amount of misinformation out there. Right now we have about, looking at the CDC data, looking at IHS data, and looking at, there's a new poll out there, a new survey, the American COVID-19 vaccine poll. We're about 50%, given my best estimate, we're about 50% of the native population is vaccinated. Now there are some tribal nations that said, oh, we have 70% of our population vaccinated. I've seen we've had 95% of our folks vaccinated. I've seen we have 80% of our people vaccinated. And guess what? In some situations, that's very accurate. But in other situations, when I go and I start to look at more data and more information, that's far from the truth. Many of our native populations are about 50%, because what doesn't happen is that we're not accounting for our large urban population, and we're not counting for the facts of undercounting. So yes, we're doing well, but the misinformation is I believe is giving a false sense of security. The other big thing is, and when I go to many of our tribal nation websites and I'm looking at vaccination protocols, I'm seeing the J&J vaccination. This is not FDA authorized yet. It's under emergency use authorization only. I mean, this isn't positive messaging. You know what I mean? And what we need to do in Indian country is to do more positive messaging around prevention, vaccinations, mask wearing, safe social distancing. We have to get back to the roots of our public health. And that's what will keep us on course to rid this virus during this time.
Dean Seneca, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
When we come back, millions of visitors to Disney's Epcot Center in Florida now know more about the Seminole Nation. We'll hear about that partnership that made this possible. The Seminole tribe partnered with Disney's Epcot Center in 2018 to create exhibits on Seminole culture. Items from the tribe's Ataki Museum were loaned out to the American Heritage Gallery, which is in the American Adventure Pavilion at the Epcot Center. The partnership has been successful and well received, especially during the pandemic, because the tribe's museum has been closed, but Epcot has reopened. Joining us today to tell us more about this joint venture is Sandra Hale Schulman. She's a freelance journalist and wrote about this recently for Indian Country Today. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you. Good morning.
So give us an idea about these exhibits.
Well, the Atatiki Museum has been there for many years. They have over 180,000 artifacts from the Seminole tribe, but it's way out in the Everglades in the southern part of Florida. There's an American Adventure Pavilion at Epcot Center, and they actually have sections for each of the Americas. So in the Southeast section, they have a special display for Seminole artifacts. So they switch it out twice a year to keep artifacts fresh, as it were. Some of these things are many, many years old. And they bring in a selection of crafts, some of them very old and very delicate. So it's a real, interesting way to bring items to people if they don't get down to the museum in the Everglades. I mean, millions of people go through this Epcot Center every year. So it's a big attraction for them.
How did the pandemic change this whole relationship?
Well, the Atatiki Museum had to close. They actually just reopened last weekend after almost a year and a half. So the fact that Epcot did manage to open many months ago, with many security and safety protocols, and then they switched out the artifacts at the beginning of the summer. So they not only reopened, but they had new attractions for people to come and see.
So one of the challenges with any museum is not just having the artifacts, but having a participation in the story. How has that gone?
Well, they tell the story in different ways. They have things that are as old as they possibly have in their archive, and then they have more contemporary items. So they try to explain in the text there how these things have evolved, both in materials and the way they were made, the way they portray the people. And it's really interesting because you can see as the Seminoles were getting access to more contemporary fabrics, more types of designs, they changed the evolution of how they made their crafts.
And the Seminole version of the story, is that incorporated throughout this?
Oh, well, of course, it's all Seminole artifacts. They have a selection of things. They do male and female dolls. They have sashes. They have bags and bowls. They're an unusual tribe in that they were very isolated, being down in the Everglades. So their whole culture evolved really very isolated and separately, a very unique kind of look than a lot of other cultures in the U.S. that were maybe perhaps meeting up and mingling more.
And that idea of contemporariness, does that come through when someone walks through the exhibit at Epcot? Do they come through thinking, this is a contemporary people?
It's hard to say. But most of the items are artifacts. They're not extremely modern. They do show some evolution in the way the dolls were made. Particularly, they used to have noses on the dolls, and they were made out of wood, which they no longer do. Wood is not a real stable material in Florida due to humidity and pests. So they changed things to making them out of fibers. Fibers dried seem to be a lot more resilient. And of course, materials went from kind of plain cotton to patterned cotton to things that have, polyesters and like a stretch material to them, and glitter even. So that's a big evolution in the style.
Florida, of course, is one of the top hotspots for the pandemic again. Are there any fears that this could all change again?
For the worse or for the better?
For the worse.
They haven't been very successful here. It's been very unfortunate. The numbers are alarming. The governor is not really, I don't believe he's doing what he should be doing to protect people. He's kind of leaving it up to people to just figure it out for themselves, which I don't think is a proper way to do it. The Seminole have been hit terribly hard by this disease. I know of one former tribal councilman that he lost his brother, his cousin, and the cousin's daughter in 1 week, just a week or so ago. So they've been terribly hard hit. And the Seminoles have a very good health system because they're a very wealthy tribe. So it just shows, how strong and how bad this virus is now.
Has the tribe instituted its own protocol separate from the state?
It's hard to say. I know that like Miss Indian World that I've interviewed several times, he was very active in vaccination programs, bringing them to, various tribal events and parking lots and community centers to encourage people to get vaccinated. There's not very clear data on whether these deaths were due to vaccinated or unvaccinated people or people with conditions that they haven't been very clear about, but it's hit them very hard.
Sandra, you write about art a lot, and so with about a minute left, I want to ask, what excites you most about this exhibit?
This exhibit, the fact that people that would probably never get down to see the Seminole Museum because it's been closed, because it's so isolated, millions of people are seeing this. And, you know, these figures are really quite unique and very colorful and very beautiful. It really gives a dramatic insight into how these people, you know, look out in the middle of swamps, and yet they're wearing capes and rows of beaded necklaces and elaborate, very elaborate hair dresses. You know, it's fascinating that this is such a colorful culture coming out of a very humid, very swampy, very isolated environment.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about this. Thank you, Sandra.
And you can go to see the Seminole Museum. It's open now, and you can take a 3D tour online at seminoleculture.org if you want to see the actual museum without going there.
Thank you. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. For all the latest news, go to IndianCountryToday.com. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This is Indian Country Today.